everyone, and welcome to a brand new podcast that we've decided to launch called Decoded. Now, the reason that we decided to launch this podcast is because we wanted to make anything that's tech related or super complicated more digestible and easy to understand, so that you can eventually pretty much send this to your mom, your grandma, your technically challenged people, or even anyone who's struggling to understand a certain topic, right? So we want to break it down into certain ways so that it's super easy to understand for anyone. I'm Kirsten Lake.
My name is Lwazi Shamase, and let's get decoded.
So our first series that we're going to go into is AI. Now, we keep hearing so much about AI the whole time. We keep hearing how it's AI this and AI that and Deep Link, Chat GPT,
Copilot, Meta,
everything.
And
the issue is that it's now gotten so complex that someone who's coming into the space doesn't know where to even begin.
I don't blame them.
Yeah.
I mean, look, personally, if you hear artificial intelligence, artificial this, that, and I'm sure the viewers will also know that the struggle just by hearing that word is, oh my G, are they going to replace our jobs? And we're here to show you guys, it's not there to replace your jobs. It's actually there to assist you in your daily routine, daily lives, whether it be in education or in business.
100%.
Correct me if I'm wrong there, Kirsten.
No, 100%. So usually when someone asks me in the beginning, like, what is AI? I like to explain it like this.
Yeah.
So back in the day, essentially what happened is we had programmers, right? And we still have them now, of course.
Called developers now.
Yeah. So essentially what happened is they were trying to code new programs that were able to reason and problem solve and things like that.
That's correct.
And the issue is that if you are trying to code something that is so natural to you as a human, it's so difficult to get that down into a algorithm, right?
That's right.
So like, for an example, if I just look at this glass of water here, I already know that it's going to be a certain weight. So I know how much pressure to apply when lifting it up, right?
That's true.
When I'm driving a car, I know that this person's braking in front of me. Either I have enough time to brake or I must overtake.
That's correct. Evasive maneuver.
The issue there is that how do you write that down into an algorithm?
Yeah.
Because it's so subconscious. Like,
that's correct.
We are just so subconsciously programmed to just know these things.
That's correct.
And we can't put that into words. So those programmers decided to create something that mimics the human brain, that almost codes itself.
Yes.
And that's where we get into artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
And it's essentially built on the human brain.
Yes, that's correct. I can add on to that as well. It's artificial. Artificial means it's made by us to mimic what our brain can do.
Yes.
And like what you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of subconscious things that we do. And remember, that's based off input and output. Whatever we see, and I'll use the braking of the car, for example. You'll know, okay, this person's braking quite fast. Let me apply a certain brake pressure into the brake pedal. That's based off of what we see visually. And that goes to our brain, which goes to the many little neurons, if I have to put it like that, to give us any outcome of what's going to happen if I apply a successful braking or not. And then the output is sending a nerve command to our leg to apply the pressure. And ladies and gentlemen, I think that's how artificial intelligence works.
Well, yes. So pretty much it's to mimic that whole cycle, but without us having to explain it on that level of detail.
That's correct.
That's where you kind of have your different divisions within artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So that's why it can be so confusing for a beginner, because a lot of people don't understand
the bare concept of it.
Artificial intelligence is actually an umbrella term.
Yes.
There's multiple things within there. There's machine learning.
Right.
You have deep learning. You have narrow AI. You have large language models. You have all of these things, and they fall under that main umbrella of something being able to understand something on that kind of level.
That's right. That's right. I mean, look, it's similar to many other disciplines like IT. It's just not IT. There's a lot of levels. Can pull that back into that conversation of AI, like what she's mentioned. A lot goes into that. A lot, like what you mentioned, deep sync, deep learning. That's just a lot, and I think we're going to cover quite a lot into that one. Of course, at the surface level.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
So I think let's get into machine learning first.
Let's start. Yeah.
So that is one of the things that we often see within AI is essentially that's how it's being used, right?
Right. That's
So
correct.
you get two different types of machine learning, and it's really simple because it's in the name. It's a machine learning, right?
Yes.
So you have two different types. You've got supervised and
Yes.
unsupervised machine learning.
Oh, I love those two terms. Yeah.
Yes. So essentially without going into too much technical detail, what this essentially means is you actually train your algorithm like you would train a dog or a cat or something.
Yes.
And essentially you give it negative responses if it gets something wrong,
Yes,
and
and
positive
positive
responses
responses
if it gets something right.
That's correct.
Right? So essentially what this kind of looks like on a day-to-day manner is more your image recognition.
Yes.
Right?
You're right.
So what you essentially do is you give this machine learning algorithm a large data set of pictures.
Yes.
And then what you do is you say, okay, which one's a cat and which one's a dog?
Yes.
If it chooses the wrong one, that's a cat or a dog, you give it a score that it fails. And
That's
if it
correct.
chooses the right one, that it's a cat or a dog, you give it a score that it passes.
That's correct.
And that essentially is how it learns to differentiate the two.
Yes.
And that's coming back to the same thing where we kind of needed an algorithm to be able to determine things like images,
That's
because
correct.
if I'm sitting here
Yes.
and I know that you are Lwazi,
Right. You know that.
I
Yeah.
know, but how do I explain that on a piece of paper? How do I
Can't.
explain that I recognize that you are you and you recognize that I am me?
Exactly.
So that's pretty much what the machine learning algorithm does, is it
Yes.
makes those connotations.
Yes.
And that's how you get into your neural networks and your deep learning.
And deep learning, exactly. And deep learning, like what you mentioned earlier, it's supervised and unsupervised. In the supervised version, of course, it does its thing, but it needs supervision of a human to say, okay, are you doing the right thing? Like what you mentioned, the positive and negative responses. If it recognizes this plant as a cat, of course, guys, it's not true biologically speaking. So that's when a human will say, no, this is a negative response. And that's where it goes back into those little tree maps called what she's mentioned, neural networks, to say, okay, no, this is actually a plant, not a cat. And that's where it's going to learn. Now it's unsupervised. Would you say it's a trial and error kind of
So
exercise?
your unsupervised is essentially where it is more like a trial and error, and it actually just takes a large amount of data.
And you're right about that unsupervised. I know that, and I saw this one YouTube video about it where they use AI, machine learning, for this player to beat the game. So the AI needs to beat the game, and it's unsupervised. So it fails so epically in the first few trials. And I think the term that they used, right, it was generations. So of course, first generation failed a lot. Second, it was better than first, but not perfected. And it went on and on and on until it got to, I think, the 67th generation. And it started to actually now become competitive and started learning advanced techniques. And that's what I found interesting about how unsupervised machine learning goes. It's a very useful tool. And what applications would you say we can actually utilize machine learning? Yep.
So the main difference between supervised learning and unsupervised learning is all within the data. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So if you can imagine this, a supervised learning, it's like a teacher.
Yes.
Okay, you're supervised.
Right.
If you get the answer wrong on the test, it's a big red mark.
Yeah, wrong.
And that's essentially where you have your programmer or something actually telling the machine learning algorithm, yes, no, and it's comparing it to the right answers, right?
That's correct.
So pretty much when you're doing your algorithm, you have a memo of all the right answers.
Yes.
And the algorithm is going to try guess.
Right.
And that's how you train it. So it's supervised.
Yes.
Unsupervised learning is where you have an unlabeled data set.
Okay.
And this has been absolutely transformative in the healthcare industry.
Really?
So this is essentially where you want the algorithm to find hidden patterns.
Yes.
So we're not going to tell it, yes, this is correct or this is wrong.
Right.
We just essentially give it a large amount of data and we say, what is different here? What can you see out of the data?
And I see where the pattern's coming now.
Yes.
Yes.
And this is why it's so transformative for fields like medicine.
That's correct.
Because if you think about genetics, right?
Yeah, genetics,
so there's so many genes that can
Yeah.
interact together to give you a certain disease. So for
Ooh.
example, glaucoma.
Yes.
Glaucoma has multiple genes that are activated on multiple different chromosomes,
Okay.
and that essentially will give you that disease.
I see.
And it can also be environmental too, right?
Interesting.
So as humans, it's very difficult for us to actually pinpoint the exact pattern
Yes.
that will switch on the disease glaucoma, because I could have 6 of those genes active,
Right.
but somehow I don't have glaucoma,
But I
and
could
yet
have
my
it.
cousin has glaucoma. So it's a very complex disease, and
Right.
there's lots of these in the medical industry. So the unsupervised learning actually gives power to these geneticists or anyone who's analyzing this type of data
Right.
to sort of figure out, okay, cool, I have all of these genes here, I don't know how they interact,
Yes.
find a pattern. And that's unsupervised learning, and it finds a pattern for
A
you.
pattern. So it will simulate any kind of scenario with those many types of gene pools and see a pattern.
Yes.
Where it says, okay, I'm picking up, if I mix gene A with gene X, it's picking up this symptom of glaucoma. Okay.
Yes. So this is actually one of the main applications. And
Right.
I want to also make it so
Abundantly
clear.
clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so clear that when we talk about AI, everyone thinks ChatGPT,
Yeah.
DeepSeek,
Meta. Copilot.
Llama, like the Facebook one, Llama.
Yes,
I think it's called
Llama.
Llama. And we've actually limited ourselves so much.
Yeah, so much.
Because these are like large language models, and
Right.
you can like obviously query these things, and you
Yes,
can
yes,
get
yes,
your
yes.
outputs, and it's very much like a text-based thing.
Yeah, text-based, yes.
But the applications of having, if we think we have like almost a digital brain,
Yes.
and the applications for that are so far
vast.
reaching besides ChatGPT and DeepSeek.
That's correct.
And that's even where you have now your self-driving cars.
Ooh, Tesla.
Yes. So that's also essentially what happened, right?
Yes.
So when you were driving Teslas way back when,
Yes.
they were recording the driver's their movements.
That's
So
correct,
They
yeah.
would be able to detect, okay, there's an obstacle here, the driver starts braking.
Yes.
And that's how they trained up these cars.
These models, yes.
Using actual real driver's data.
Yes, exactly.
And that's essentially, and obviously you have to have a pretty strong machine learning model to have a
To have
self-driving
that
car.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep.
And you're right. You can even expand on that from an aviation perspective with the new aircraft from Airbus and Boeing, where, look, they models for their auto throttle, their autopilots. They even have their own database within each aircraft on based on the models that they, like you were saying, they were developing on how to actually react in certain scenarios. I mean, there was actually one where there's a auto throttle, and then they call it toga, where it's a takeoff, go around function, where just by a switch of a button, the whole plane knows how to configure itself automatically for either takeoff or if it's going for a go around in case there's some unstable approach or unstable landing. That's how vast AI goes. And you're right about that. It's people are limiting the possibility of AI.
Yeah. And I think it also comes from that lack of understanding, because
Yes.
when you just do any kind of search on AI, it's just so much information overload.
Yes.
And if you're not searching for the right terms, you're not going to know, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
if you have a very specific task, like you want to go and analyze like hidden patterns in your data set,
Yes.
you're going to want to search for an unsupervised machine learning algorithm
That's
tutorial, right?
Right.
But you wouldn't even know where to start, because you
Yeah,
think, okay,
wouldn't.
this is AI, and then you get all of these results, and it's just total
information overload. And you're just like, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, no. That's the thing. You're right. It's and regarding that as well, it's crazy, like how it's actually advanced this much. And it comes down to that prompting. Remember what I mentioned earlier, where the AI will give you what you give it. What do I mean by that? If I input a vague sentence of what I want to search for example, if I'm looking for a coffee, how do I make coffee? It'll give me the bare basics with a few references of what it picked up, because remember, it can search those various models that it's connected to. But if I prompt it quite efficiently, where I say, okay, I want to make a cappuccino with extra, foam on the top, with two spoons of sugar, even though that's a lot, guys, 2 spoons. And it must make sure that it's not too strong, but at the same time, it shouldn't be weak. And please give it in a 250 milliliter cup. Look how specific I was. And I'm giving that to the AI, and it's going to spit out quite a detailed description or output, should I say, to what I want to achieve. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what AI is supposed to do. It's not supposed to replace you. It's to actually assist you. And that's where we want, Kirsten and I want to elaborate and hammer the point on. It's not going to replace people's jobs, but it's going to actually effectively do efficiencies within everyone's job. Everything, for example, like service desks. Let's take service desk management, for example. Service desk management, I mean, some of them will literally stand there and look at an email for hours to see new tickets, write it down. No. If you put an AI model there, it already take that information, extract it out, and then based on the skill set it's supplied, so remember guys, input that it supplies to its database, it will then recommend the recommended person or assign the ticket to the best person for this job.
100%, yeah. But I think even you're going too complex, actually.
Oh, really?
Because imagine now we have someone who's watching this who doesn't even know what ChatGPT or DeepSeek is.
Yes.
So maybe let's go into what that is.
Yeah.
What is a ChatGPT?
Yes, the GTP models. Yes, so pretty much these GTP models, all these AIs are built off just a basic. I would say, guys, it's more of a, how can I say, a brand. No, it was developed by OpenAI, which is a company, a software company, and it's a bunch of models that communicate. And correct me if I'm wrong, with the internet and information supplied. Also, they can upload information to that said model. Yeah. And that's what forms the base of it. So it's just, I would say, I'll describe it as a library of information.
Yeah.
Right. And then what they put on top of that is a layer where it says, okay, we're going to allow input from the person, whether it be text, images, video, etc., to then query that vast storage of information. And based on what you give it, it'll then piece together the most optimal response. And then it's going to give you that output.
Yeah. The way I like to also think about it is, if we go back to the brain analogy.
The brain analogy, yes.
Right? So if we think of, artificial intelligence is a artificial brain.
Right.
Okay.
And it's bare bone.
And we have different types. So we've got narrow AI, which is this artificial brain has been trained to only do one thing.
Yes, one thing only.
That is, okay, cool, a customer service. So this artificial brain is really good at answering specific questions about your business.
That's correct. And another application for that is those self-driving cars or adaptive cruise control within cars.
Yeah, it's supposed to do this one thing. Yeah,
that's correct.
And if I'm now prompting this chatbot, right? I don't need it to tell me political information.
No. Oh,
or
why?
information about a completely different field. All it needs to be narrowed down to is
that said field.
Right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then you get your ChatGPTs and your DeepSeeks, which are essentially they're a full product, right?
A big one.
And what they've essentially been trained on is large amounts of data. So this brain is a brain that has been given, if you can imagine, the entire internet.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Into it.
If you can imagine.
How
big. If I could remember the whole internet.
From its inception. Yeah.
I mean, because somehow all I remember is like cat videos or like really funny
Remember Vines, yes.
But like that's not useful, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not useful at all.
And that's why it's so important. It's like ChatGPT is actually essentially your friend who's gone and memorized the whole internet.
100%.
And if you had access to someone in the real world who'd memorized the whole internet, what would you ask them?
Exactly.
And that's how you should be seeing ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because it should be a tool to help you do your research, to help you do these kind of tasks.
That's correct. And exactly, yes, it can help you. Listen to the keyword we're saying. It can do it, it can recommend, but at the end of the day, guys, it's artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Use your real intelligence now from what you've gathered, what you've trained, and apply it there. And that's where now your efficiencies can actually skyrocket.
Yes, 100%. And like for me, I just think of artificial intelligence as a tool. Now, I'm going to say something slightly controversial.
Go ahead. I like it.
The way I see it now in 2025,
right?
Let's go back a little.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to let's go back to cavemen times.
Yes.
Okay, if you can imagine, Johnny now discovered fire.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is a tool now that they can use to cook food, and it really transformed everything.
Yes.
But now, imagine Sam now doesn't want to use Johnny's fire because he's afraid of the fire.
Exactly.
Is Sam and Sam's family is now going to be eating raw fish? He's probably going to get more sick.
That's correct.
They're not going to thrive with this newfound tool, right?
Yeah, you're right. You won't.
I think AI is the new fire.
No, it is.
And I honestly believe if you are not incorporating this in some sort of way in your business, if you're not using it to optimize something you're doing that's repetitive, if you're not trying to get to know it, you will be like Sam, who's not having access to fire because he's afraid of this thing.
That's correct.
But we also have to understand that this is a tool, and it's designed to help us.
Right.
So essentially, if you're going to just not use it, I do believe that it will be very difficult to move with the times. And then eventually it's going to become everybody's using the fire.
Yes, as the default.
And then you didn't bother to learn how to light a match or how to use the flint or whatever the case may be. You know,
exactly.
Because right now we're at the stages where we don't even have like a lighter.
Yeah,
we're flintstoning this thing.
Yes.
And like, I want to learn how to make the fire with the flintstones before the lighter, so that I can understand the basics of this thing before it keeps growing.
Before it grows to a point where now it could be part of our daily lives.
Yeah.
And we're going to even cover that subject of neural networks, where actually those chips can be in your brain. It can have AI into it. 100%. And that's what's going to happen. I think that's where the world's heading to. And like what you mentioned, Kirsten, if from a business education and a social, let's even mention society as a whole, see it as a tool. Like let's take our phones, for example. Do you understand our phones? Let's take, even in our lifetimes, we've seen the phone transform from a big brick to the infamous Nokia 3310 to the first smartphones of Galaxy and iPhone to what it is now. It's a tool. It's part of our lives. And that also, due to that, it's boomed, it did a ripple effect and boomed other industries. For example, the rise of social media. And even then, that AI, that artificial intelligence is going to move in. It's already in our social medias already, with Meta on WhatsApp. They have it on Instagram, right? I think they do.
Yeah.
You can query it.
Yeah.
And remember, guys, we're in 2025 as of this recording. Just 10 years ago, this wasn't there. And what businesses and people need to understand now, that we're in the fifth industrial revolution. We thought the fourth industrial revolution is where things are going, they digitize into the cloud. You know, everyone was having a nice hurrah. Guys, we have to move away from legacy, which that was the case. But now AI is coming. And AI, what caused the boom of the fifth industrial revolution is AI being open source to the public. That's what sparked the boom.
Yeah.
And it's going to challenge a lot of things. Right now, in terms of AI governance, and we need to touch upon that, ethical prompting with artificial intelligence, like what you mentioned, narrow AI, and I would say narrow and wide body AI.
And deep, yeah.
And deep, yeah. It's narrow. I can prompt it to ask, how do I make a sandwich to a model that's specific for flying planes? It's going to ask my input invalid.
Yes. And this is also the thing. It's like, if you think about it, these large language models such as ChatGPT and DeepSeek, they've been trained up on what's currently on the internet. And now remember, what's currently on the internet was made by humans.
That's correct.
So it's going to inherently be biased.
Yes.
And this is a serious problem that we've seen with the use of these ChatGPTs and things like this, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Because now, if the government has skewed a certain opinion, the answer you're going to get is going to be of a certain opinion. And actually, the other day, I wanted to test this out, right? And there's whole communities, okay, this is a random example, but there's whole communities that believe that the earth is flat.
Yeah, literally.
You know, and, you know, honestly, conspiracy theorists, I'm a conspiracy theorist myself.
Yeah, I love it.
Really love the conspiracy theory, especially a good one that makes you go,
Oh, that questions you,
Yes. And like these flat earth people, like they have actual proof, like of their own volition. They've got proof. But because the general consensus is that the earth is not flat, you cannot get a ChatGPT to give you any information about these communities at all.
At all.
Like you can't. So the other day I was prompting it and I asked, is the earth flat? And then it was like, no, it's not. And this is the end of the discussion. Like it actually shut me down.
Whoa.
But if I go onto Google and I want to go and like research, you can actually find evidence of this kind of stuff. So it almost is like, it's been censored towards a certain viewpoint.
That's correct.
And even I remember when it first came out, if you would ask it certain religious questions as well, it wouldn't answer.
It wouldn't answer.
Yeah. And DeepSeek, if you ask anything about Taiwan.
Yes, or the Chinese government, it's going to deny, access denied. And to add on to that one now, and this is what probably businesses are looking at, AI, ethical AI, or ethical prompting, should I say. They want to know, fine, we're going to give it to our employees. We're going to, even in the education sector, we're going to give it to the students. But how do we monitor if there's any unethical prompting? And the fact that those AI models can be restricted, again, for businesses, again, if they want to make their own narrow-bodied AI that's specific for their business, which I think that's where, of course, you and I get into that, where we can actually help those businesses go into that direction. You can, just to calm down those concerns that they'll have. What happens if a employee wants to prompt, what's the CEO's salary? Those are these kind of questions. Yeah, because they would want to know. Because remember, if the AI is integrated into the whole business model from finance to HR, there has to be some governance. Yes, there has to be governance. And that's where now, and again, we have to work with the cybersecurity team as well. And of course, software engineers like ourselves. To actually make sure that these protocols are in place.
100%. Yeah. And I truly believe that if we just also think about how these tools are used and we fully understand them, that's the problem.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that a lack of understanding is going to cause so many problems. Because also, if you don't understand how your data is being used, that's also a major risk. Major risk. Yeah. But that's all we have time for today.
Yes, that's correct. Well, my name is Lwazi Shamase.
I'm Kirsten Lake, and thank you for joining Decoded.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, hope you did as well.
Yeah.